It's crunch time for the UK's Brexit bill. Ministers in the House of Commons have 2 days to discuss amendments to the bill before it advances to the upper house. Many pro-Europe MPs are expected to rev up efforts to keep the British economy aligned with the European Union. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has promised his party will vote against the bill as it stands. He remains concerned over the lack of protection for parliamentary democracy and human rights in the bill. Some key areas of debate include retaining EU law within UK regulations. MPs will also discuss the extent to how much power UK ministers will hold when changing EU legislation. And ministers will seek to iron out a legal framework to address the Welsh and Scottish government's concerns that matters once under the jurisdiction of Brussels would be transferred to Westminster. While British Prime Minister Theresa May tries to strike a deal with anti-Brexiters, she also faces a split in cabinet on Britain's position when it heads into trade talks with the EU over the next few weeks. Those talks are poised to be another uphill battle for May, as leaked documents on Monday showed the EU is planning to toughen up its stance on Brexit clauses. In the paper, member states urged EU's Brexit negotiator to have Brussels demand a veto of any trade deal signed by Britain during a 2-year Brexit transition period, which would be a big blow to UK's economy. One country watching the Brexit talks closely is Norway, whose diplomats have expressed interest in renegotiating ties should the UK strike a deal to stay in the EU single market through a special partnership. Norway is currently part of the European Economic Area and makes a larger financial contribution to the bloc than the UK, but does not have voting rights in Brussels institutions. Despite reports of EU's tougher stance, its leaders on Tuesday welcomed the idea of Britain changing its mind on Brexit.
Wasn't it David Davis himself who said, if a democracy cannot change its mind, it ceases to be a democracy? We, here on the continent, haven't had a change of heart. Our hearts are still open to you.
For now, Theresa May has pledged to follow through on Brexit despite the lack of a solid plan and wavering support at home. Laila Humairah, TRT World.
Let's get more on this now with economist Vicky Pryce in London. She's a board member at the UK-based Centre for Economics and Business Research. Vicky, welcome to Money Talks as always. Great to have you. Does it surprise you that the EU is toughening up its demands over this transition period?
Oh, no, it doesn't surprise me at all. The interesting thing is that everyone was looking at the transition period as being one where we can be negotiating all sorts of deals in the quiet, if you like, not necessarily terribly open, but certainly being allowed to start negotiating deals with other countries. Well, that is unlikely to now be allowed, and I think it doesn't make any great sense anyway, because nobody will want to negotiate anything with the UK if we don't know what the EU-UK deal itself is going to be. And I think all that we'll be able to do during that period is talk to the countries that already have a trade deal with the EU, preparing for those trade deals to be either rolled over or be amended depending on what the final agreement is with Europe. So it is quite constraining. We certainly the people on the Remain side, or people who have been looking at what people on the Remain side have been saying, is that it was going to be difficult all along. We're not going to have the freedom to do the sort of things we thought we were going to be able to do, or some people thought we'd be able to do. And that realisation is beginning to hit home.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about this report that Norway apparently does not want the EU to give the UK any wiggle room, especially when it comes to things like fishing quotas. How much leverage does Norway actually have in all of this, considering it's not actually a full member of the EU?
I would say that the leverage isn't that great, but it's hinting at the problems ahead, because there are all those countries that have arrangements right now, including, for example, Switzerland, which has bilateral agreements on various sectors and still has lots of obligations, like let everyone come in from the EU without restrictions, something they tried to change in a referendum. They haven't been able to do so yet. There are other countries like Turkey, of course, with special agreements, and everyone will be looking to whatever the UK manages to sort out with the EU and saying, well, maybe we'd like a little bit more of this, or why can't we have perhaps some extra privileges given how much we're already paying into this. And Norway, of course, contributes quite significantly. It has exemptions on the fisheries side, a very, very important one. The UK, I think certainly the people who wanted Brexit are very keen to have something similar too. But then there will be differences. So we are talking increasingly about staying in the customs union. Norway is not in it. So it's going to be a very complicated scene ahead.
Let's talk a little bit about the UK economy. Latest inflation numbers for the UK coming in at about 3%. It looks like that pass-through effect that we saw after the sharp devaluation in the pound following the Brexit vote seems to be working its way out of the UK economy. Does this strengthen the argument among the Leave camp that Britain could withstand the economic fallout of a hard Brexit?
Not really. I mean, what's been going on so far is that the economy has been sustained by an awful lot of money coming from the Bank of England, huge injection of liquidity into the system, and then, of course, the fall in the pound, which has helped exports. So the inflation impact is by the by. Of course, what it has done, it has diminished real disposable incomes because wages have not been rising as fast. Obviously, anything that brings inflation down a little bit in the future is good news in terms of the consumer. But overall, we're talking about an economy which is likely to be growing a lot more slowly than its major competitors. And we've moved from being the fastest growing into being the slowest growing. So there is absolutely nothing in those figures that suggests that everything's going to be rosy in the future.
Economist Vicky Pryce, thank you very much indeed.